questions to answer with comics is the very basic one. Where do I begin? With so many years of continuity and an endless amount of series to choose from, finding a starting point can be difficult, but that's where this series comes in. Each week, I look at all the new series coming out, pick out ongoing series starting new arcs, notable new series, and trades and graphic novels being released. Then to finish things up, I pick out my starting point of the week, the book I'm most excited about coming out this week. To start things off, let's look at notable new number ones debuting this week. The biggest new number one this week is probably Batman 1989, and I'm a bit excited for this book, to be honest. And I know people hear another Batman title, and actually we'll talk about a number of Batman-related series that are debuting this week and roll their eyes and thinking, do we need more Batman? We have so much Batman, and I get that. I get where that's coming from. I don't think that complaint is not legitimate. At the same time, I try to view every comic isolated to, the quality itself, and I do really love Batman 1989, that version of the movie. I know a lot of people seem to have different takes on it, but I love the surrealness of it. I love how it doesn't take itself too seriously. It almost has a Silver Age feel in a way, which is weird because back in the day it was known as the dark and gritty Batman, but still. I'm also really excited for this because it has Joe Quinones as artist, who, I don't mean this I'm also excited for this because it has Joe Quinones as an artist, and I'm a big fan of his work, mostly because of the series style H for Hero, which is a very silly concept, but was such a great book, mainly because of his art. The concept of it is this kid would call up and become a hero, and every time he'd become a different type of hero. But the thing is, it also would clash and have different types of styles. Like, one book looked like the 1990s, like image style. You'd have a manga style. The versatility he showed as an artist was absolutely incredible. You would think that it was a different artist every time. The way he was able to ape every different style and design was really overlooked. I really think he should have been nominated for an Eisner for the work. My thought is, if he's able to do that, he should be able to capture the spirit of the Batman 89 movie. And say what you will maybe about the story, but there's no denying when it comes to just the world, the set design, things like that, the old Gothic feel, it's pretty phenomenal, and maybe the best part of the entire movie. So if they can capture that, and I like the idea of existing within that universe, telling more stories within that universe, that can be exciting. They've done a lot of that with like the animated series, continuing it. There'll also be a future comic coming out that's taking place in the Superman, the Christopher Reeves universe, so that's kind of cool. So maybe this is more for Gen Xers or something like that. People who love the Snyderverse may be thinking this is stupid. I don't know, but I think it's an interesting book to look at because of just the team that's involved and the idea behind it. It could lead to something that's actually pretty cool. We're not done yet with Batman comics, as we have a new number one, I guess number 0, with I Am Batman number 0, but this is the Future State Batman, once again written by John Ridley. I've been liking this stuff okay. It hasn't been the greatest. I really love what John Ridley has been doing with the other History of the DC Universe books, but for this next Batman stuff, I feel like it just hasn't necessarily clicked with me. I still feel like after all these issues, that character doesn't feel well defined or all that intriguing compared to other Batman characters or other characters that he has written. I don't know why that is, but maybe this could fix that, because it being a 0 issue. But maybe this could fix that, being a 0 issue, getting into more of the motivations and things like that, kind of slim things down. I tend to be a fan of these if they're done right. I mean, we haven't really gotten a straight origin for the next Batman yet, and some kind of flashbacks to things like that, so this can help fill in a lot of the blanks. Plus, if you are a person that has been really enjoying the next Batman or enjoyed the Future State issues and want to continue that run, you'd want to check out this issue. And again, the Batman-related comics do not stop with Pennyworth number 1, and I completely forgot there was a Pennyworth TV series. I don't even know what channel it's on. It's insane that we live in a world today where there are comic book related TV shows and I don't even know where they exist. That's just the world we live in. There's just so much content and shows, it's hard to keep up with everything. But I've not watched the Pennyworth show, so I can't speak to the quality of it, but if you were a fan, this book is actually going to be continuing that story, kind of telling the story in between where that show ended and where we are in real time. It definitely has a huge James Bond feel, and I'm not necessarily against the concept whatsoever. I know people think, why have an Alfred comic? That seems a bit silly, and I don't know. You can get good ideas out of anything, and Alfred does have a unique history to at least put it into somewhat of a context. So this might actually even work if you're not a Batman fan. I'm not sure. And it does seem like it's weird that you're having Alfred with a comic and other major DC characters don't have comics right now, the way that the world of DC is. But it is kind of cool knowing that for those that did like the TV show, and maybe, I don't even know if it's canceled, maybe it has been canceled, it's hard to keep up with that. But if you have been liking the show and you want more of it, or you want to see that series continued, that story continued, you'll be able to check out this new series. It's a limited series, so you don't have to invest in a great deal. My hope is, too, it's welcoming to new readers, so maybe if you haven't been watching that show at all, you can also jump on board if you want to. Now moving over to the world of Marvel for a brand new series of Defenders #1, and this seems to be more of the classic Defenders lineup, at least pieces of it, with Doctor Strange and Silver Surfer. Among we see that we have continuations of Betty from Immortal Hulk, where she's that red creature, and some other characters that I really don't know. But I think the biggest reason I'm excited for this series is the creative team, and looking at it being Al Ewing, who I think is, after Immortal Hulk, kind of solidified himself as one of Marvel's best writers, and Javier Rodriguez, who is, I think, one of Marvel's best artists. I talked about it in previous weeks when we were mentioning his series that he worked on, The History of the Marvel Universe, and how fantastic that was. And now seeing him take on the Defenders is a huge intrigue for me. I love the way he designs his world, his panel design, creating art within art, utilizing images and putting panels inside of it. It's just really creative, and I think he's doing things that kind of break the mold for the comic book world, and I really think that he deserves a lot more attention as one of today's best artists. Also, he often colors his own stuff as well. He utilizes a really bright palette, the classic superhero feel, which is perfect for a comic like this. The History of the Marvel Universe was kind of, again, capturing the retro feel of the entire history of Marvel, and this seems to be kind of living in classic Marvel of old, that those timeless types of stories that don't seem like they're trying to just relive the MCU, but exist in the Marvel comic book universe, which I'm excited about. So the last Defender series, which again was more based on the Netflix show with Brian Michael Bendis and David Marquez, which was a really solid book, actually. I advise checking that out. Was good, but this is, again, taking that name and utilizing it for what it used to be, with this, more of a cosmic, kind of the Avengers in space in a way, was usually the best way to describe it. Often Defender series tend to kind of come and go, but based upon the creative team, I have reason to believe this might be one of Marvel's better books this year. Last week I talked about how I needed to keep a running count of how many weeks in a row we get a new #1 from Cullen Bunn, and I should have expanded that a bit in saying a new #1 from Cullen Bunn and or Jeff Lemire, because I feel like they're pretty much writing all the comics right now, as we're getting a new #1 from Jeff Lemire this week with the Unbelievable Unteens #1, and this is also drawn by Tyler Cook, who's a fantastic artist, another creative team I'm really excited about. They've worked together previously when they did the Colonel Weird series for the Black Hammer universe, and that was a fantastic looking book, a really great addition to the Black Hammer universe. And now this is not existing within Black Hammer. It seems to be its own thing, but again, looking to kind of exist within the surreal, which tends to be Jeff Lemire's knack as of late. If you wanted to check out my recent review of Primordial #1, his upcoming series with Andre Sorrentino, you'll see what I'm talking about there. But this book itself is about a comic book creator, trying to be a comic book creator, who goes to a comic convention, and shortly after that sees one of her actual creations in real life. It makes her wonder, is this a character that has come to life, or is there actually some mystery behind this universe? Actually, has she been lied to her entire life? It seems to be somewhat of a twist on the X-Men legend in a way. And one thing we know about Jeff Lemire is that he's really good at taking ideas that are commonplace within the comic book landscape and putting a crazy cool twist on them. I mean, that's pretty much what Black Hammer is. He has written X-Men in the past, and to be honest, it wasn't all that great, but I do wonder, was that Jeff Lemire or was that editorial? Because it was a time and place in which X-Men just weren't really good, no matter who was writing them. So but I'm glad him potentially taking ideas that maybe he wanted to do and couldn't do, get a great artist like Tyler Cook and have them bring this idea to life. So if you're a Jeff Lemire fan, or you're an X-Men fan, or you're looking for something new, this is probably the new #1 that I'm most excited about coming out this week. Out for Aftershock this week is Campisi, The Dragon Incident #1, and this series seems to combine the world of fantasy and crime into one story. The main character is this mob type of character. He's a fixer. He is probably the one that they go out and try to solve problems in the sense of somebody owes a debt, he gets that debt. Well, what happens when that debt involves a dragon? We'll see how that goes. One of the reasons I'm excited for this book is because it comes from the writer of Kaiju Score, which is a really fun series from earlier this year. Again, that too seemed to combine different genres of crime and the kind of kaiju story, and I thought it did a good job of kind of taking tropes of both and coming out with something new. And again, this seems to be a similar idea, taking a crime story but adding in a fantastical element to give something new. It's a different artist though. It's an artist I don't have a lot of experience with, but same was the case for a Kaiju Score, and I really love that style. As a person who does enjoy both of those genres, crime tends to be my favorite genre, and I like fantasy when done right, in the right context. So when you put them together, it tends to work for me. So if you're like me, or if you enjoyed Kaiju Score, you may want to check out this book this upcoming week. From Diamond this week is Kiss the Phantom Obsession #1, and last week I talked about things I just wasn't really into, and it seemed to be a common trend. We'll see if that continues this week, but I'll just say Kiss has never been a band, outside of some songs here and there, that I really was a huge fan of. I mean, clearly you can admire them and what they've done for the industry, their theatrics, and it does kind of make sense to take a band like that and put them in the world of comics. It's not the first comic that has been focused on Kiss. There's been a lot of them, and I've tried to read a few. They just really didn't hit that well for me. It seemed like a licensed property that was looking more at kind of capitalizing on the license than it was telling a great story. That may not be the case here. Dynamite, I think, in the past has shown that they could take something that may not seem like a great comic, like Peter Cannon's Thunderbolt, a character that really hasn't existed in comics in forever, and tell one of the best comics of the year. Will that be the case here? This is a creative team I don't have a lot of experience with, so I can't say. But if you're a huge Kiss fan, if you're just looking for something different, a huge Kiss fan in your life, and you're looking for maybe a book for them to try, you may want to try out this one. Well, now that we talked about notable series debuting this week, let's move over to ongoing series starting new arcs. The first ongoing series starting a new arc is Miles Morales' Spider-Man #29, and this is the fallout of the Clone Saga, which has finally ended. And it was a bit weird that we were getting a Clone Saga many, many years later with a new Spider-Man, especially when most people look at the Clone Saga as a story that simply wasn't that great. However, I thought at least the first few issues of the Clone Saga that I read within this was actually a cool idea, and the way it approached it was nothing like the original Clone Saga, which is smart. I didn't finish it, not because I didn't like it. It was just a crazy month when I wasn't doing videos, so I lost track of a lot of comics, including this one, but I do plan on going back. I can't decide if I want to go back and reread that or just jump on here. I think I might just jump on just to see how great of a starting point it can be. And I think that's something, like, if you're a huge Miles Morales fan, you want to read a lot of his comics, and can be somewhat intimidating to know where to start, know where to begin. I think something like this, if you're just looking for a starting point, maybe this might be a good opportunity for you just to see if it works, and if it does, you got a brand new comic to read. Also starting a new arc this week is Captain Marvel #31, and I can't believe this series is already up to 31 issues. I really think Kelly Thompson's been doing a great job along with all of her artists to tell a really convincing and compelling Carol Danvers story, which is kind of unheard of in a way. There's been a lot of attempts to tell great Captain Marvel stories, and a lot of them have failed, or some of them have been really good and got canceled too early, which has kind of happened to her ongoing, and then Civil War 2 happened, but let's not get into that. This book has been, I think, really fun, really exploring her character, going into the past. It felt like an event nearly every arc. This seems like to be more of a catch your breath type of story. It's her kind of rekindling her relationship with James Rhodes as they go out on a date to see how things go. And of course, when superheroes try to take the night off, nothing seems to go well, but those tend to be some of the best stories, especially if it's like one and done or something like that. So if you, similar to Miles Morales, if you're a Carol Danvers fan, a Captain Marvel fan, there are not a huge amount of great Captain Marvel stories, but this has been really a good one, and very often when they've gotten a new arc, it's been really welcoming. Kelly Thompson, I think, has a knack for that, of allowing people to jump on at different points. So if you're interested, you may want to check out this issue. So this next comic, I wasn't necessarily sure if it was a new arc or not, but I thought it's a milestone issue, so it's important to bring up either way. So this is Runaways #38, which, why would that be a milestone? Because Legacy, it's also Runaways #100, and you could think, with it being the 100th issue, it would be like a $10 book, but it seems to be normal price. and also kind of a celebration of the Runaways, which this current arc, this current run right now is so underrated. When the first run came out many eons ago, I remember everyone talking about how great it was. There have been other attempts after that with different writers, and it just never really clicked. But since Rebel Wilson has taken over this book, it's been really solid. I think capturing kind of the spirit of the original, but in a unique way, which makes sense since she's a YA author, and I think she can capture that type of idea and concept, the personal relationships, the drama, but in a way that feels authentic for characters of this age and of this time. And I think it's one that I think hopefully will get more and more attention. And that at all interests you, like if you want to like the CW shows but don't like the approach that many of them take, or maybe if you even like the TV show that was regarding Runaways and want something more, this is one I would advise checking out. If you enjoy this issue, I would even advise going back and trying to reread it from issue number 1. Most of all of it's available digitally right now, and it's one of those books I think more and more people need to pay attention to. I'm excited that Marvel has let it go on this long, because often a book like this would be canceled 20 issues ago, so it's a book that definitely deserves much more support. Also starting a new arc this week is Silver Coin number 5, and it's a similar series to something like Haha or The Ice Cream Man in the sense of each issue is a standalone issue. What's different though is that this has a different creative team. Well, kind of. Michael Walsh is an artist every time, but he brings in different comic book creators and writers. This time Chip Zdarsky is taking over, and I've actually really liked the idea of keeping the same artist in a way, and I feel like when you have a different artist every time, even though I've enjoyed like Haha for example, but I do think that the quality of each issue has been really dependent upon the quality of the artist, and I feel sometimes they can kind of diminish the importance of art because you think, oh, it's the writer that drives how good it is, but I think this has shown that the artist is just as important, and I think it's really also shown how great of an artist Michael Walsh is. Well, to be honest, with an artist I didn't necessarily pay that much attention to before this, but I have also checked out his Sleep Stories on Kickstarter. It's also available online if you're interested, and if you've been enjoying this, you want to check that out. So if you're another horror fan, you're looking for a horror anthology, the plethora of great horror books right now is pretty amazing, and I think this has been one of the most consistent ones as well. On a completely other side of the spectrum, we have Batman and Scooby-Doo Mysteries number 5, and this was a book I meant to catch up with, but I simply haven't for unfortunate reasons, just because I do like seeing monthly comics geared towards more of a kid audience. This specific issue seems Scooby-Doo teaming up with Thelma, but going after the character of Bane, and each issue's been like an episode of Scooby-Doo with a guest star, or helping Batman take on a different type of villain, the Joker, what have you, and kind of in that mode, very welcoming to kids in that way. So if you have a kid who's a Batman fan and maybe you're concerned with the content of the current Batman runs or the more adult stuff, this might be your better way of going. There's not a great number of children's books that come out in this fashion. There's tons of YA comics that exist, most in the graphic novel form, but I do love that they're kind of taking these two properties. And I don't know how big Scooby-Doo is with kids. My kid actually really likes Scooby-Doo, but I know a lot don't. It's kind of like one of those things that may be passe, but this is something that can maybe bring it back into public consciousness just a little bit. Now that we talked about ongoing series starting in new arcs, let's move over to the world of trades and graphic novels coming out, starting with the Omnibus of John Byrne's Fourth World. And when people say Fourth World, they tend to think Jack Kirby, which makes sense because he's the one that kind of made it famous and created it. But on the second level, maybe just beneath someone like Jack Kirby would be an artist like John Byrne, who certainly has had his impact on the industry as well, potentially both good and bad. But if you are a huge fan of John Byrne, or you love the Fourth World and you love that universe, you may want to check out this omnibus. Now, I'm kind of somewhat disappointed because we're supposed to be getting that the Fourth World movie, but unfortunately kind of fizzled out, which is sad, but at least we still have the comic book universe. I've not read nearly that many Fourth World comics, so something like this does excite me to kind of go into that world and see different interpretations of it, because I do think there's a lot there to kind of ape, and really how much it helped shape the DC universe for such a long time. I mean, Darkseid has been such a huge part of the DC lore for forever now, and you kind of forget where that comes from. But so interesting combination again. So if you're a huge fan of either, you may want to check out this omnibus coming out this week. say that, distance lets a heart grow fonder, and I feel like they should also add in time, because I feel like after a certain time, things that were looked upon in a great negative light eventually, for many of them, people tend to turn around a bit, the power of nostalgia in a way. I bring that up because this week is also the release of the 10th anniversary of the New 52 collection, and I remember when the New 52 came out, and it was about a time when I was somewhat into comics, but just the controversy, how many people loved it, hated it, there was just a lot of debate regarding it, and it came out, and there's, I think, mixed feelings. There are a lot of great books, there are a lot of books that people had issues with. There's just, surprisingly, the comic book world can be a bit fickle at times. But anyways, if you're a big fan of the New 52 and you want to see a cool collection of a lot of the books that existed at that time, and you wanted to be able to collect them and maybe, together and just get that experience that you had now a decade ago, which is insane that it's now been an entire decade that the New 52 started, you may want to check out this collection this week. Also coming out this week from Marvel is Iron Fist Heart of the Dragon trade paperback, and I enjoyed this series. It was a fun series that felt very old school Marvel, which made sense because it was written by legendary comic book creator Larry Hama, and it was about people going around trying to kind of kill and take the magic from the different dragons that exist within the Iron Fist world. I was a huge fan of the run of Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction back in the day, and this was a very different take. It actually picks upon different storylines that happened a few years ago, including Iron Fist having a daughter, and expands upon that. It also included a cavalcade of different Marvel characters like Luke Cage, and also apparently the most famous comic book villain of all time, based upon the reaction to Black Widow, Taskmaster, all within this world. So you didn't just have Iron Fist, they had a nice little family built around him. And the art was pretty solid as well. The artist who worked on it worked on things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in the past, and I think that lent itself really well. So not the most outstanding book in the world, nothing that I would say is near to the level of the past Iron Fist series from the Brubaker run, but I think really solid, a good example of what you can do with the character. One of my favorite comic book series of the year is coming out on trade with Crimson Flower. This is written by Matt Kent with art by Matt Lulinski, which I probably pronounced that incorrectly, but this was the first time I've ever experienced this art, and after getting this, I'm trying to get more and more. I love his style. It's almost like R. Crumb in a way. It's very unique, and part of what made this book so memorable. The story itself is about this girl who as a child saw her father be killed, and then she went on the hunt to kill those that and find out who exactly assassinated him, and kind of brings her on this journey. And to add in little aspects of it, it brings in things like folklore and European folklore within it. So she sees people like wolves or different things like that within her head. It's more true to life, but the fanatical elements are imagined in a way. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of how it ended, but the journey up to that I think was really great, and like I mentioned, it was always fantastic to look at. So if you're looking for something a bit different, maybe you want to check out this book this week. I have to say, I absolutely love this idea. It's Marvel August 1961 Omnibus, and you might be wondering, what series was 1961? I don't ever remember a Marvel series being called 1961, and it's called that because what it is taking all the stories that came out in August of 1961, and why that's a popular date or notable time is because that's when Fantastic Four #1 came out and kind of reshaped the world of Marvel, taking all those stories and putting it into one collection, kind of like a time capsule that is more fresh and new in a way. And I actually really love that idea, a way of kind of experiencing what comics were like in a very specific time and place, to really put in perspective why Fantastic Four #1 was so great when you can compare it to everything else that was coming out at the same time. And a lot of the stuff that's being printed in this really hasn't seen print before, so that's pretty incredible, and I just really love this idea, and I think I'd love to see it doing more and more. Imagine it doing it with like Action Comics #1, if they could even do that, or Detective Comics #25, I mean Amazing Fantasy 15. I think that the list is endless of just taking a specific time and place, taking a really infamous and important comic, and just seeing what it was like. Would I spend the money on this for that experience, considering how much omnibuses are? If I'm being honest, probably not. But if I could find it for a cheaper price, or maybe find an extra $100 on the ground by accident, maybe I would check it out. But if you at all intrigued about this idea, you may want to give it a shot. Also coming out this week is work from a Million graphic novel, which is an adaptation of the Yves Zemebro story from the 1980s, and one of the most notable things about this one, it's a crime story that takes on the idea of a private detective. The setup may sound familiar. You have a private detective that is hired by a singer who won $1 million prize in order to try to live a more secluded life, and things of course go haywire. What's really notable about this, when this character was introduced in the 1970s and 80s, is that it was the first time there was ever a crime story of this ilk led by a lesbian detective. And of course, we had characters like Sam Spade and things like that, but in 1978, homosexuality was certainly looked down upon much more than it is today. So it was someone very notable for that, and of course, especially in the 80s when you had a lot going on. So there's a lot of importance to the original story. It's great to see it in a new form, and for people to kind of realize that this book exists, because to be honest, before this graphic novel came out, I was really unaware of this story. And as I've mentioned before, I am a big fan of the crime genre, so I'm all for seeing new ideas and new characters. So I don't think this is necessarily going to make you have to read the other editions of the book. This wasn't the first book within the series. This, came out a few years after the first book was introduced, but it still should be welcoming to new readers. Now I talked about ongoing series starting new arcs, notable new series, and trades of graphic novels coming out. Let's move over to the world of my pick of the week, the comic book I'm most excited about coming out this week. This was a week in which my pick of the week, my starting point of the week, kind of came out of nowhere in a way. Often it's because of the creative team. Like, the start, it was probably going to be the Jeff Lemire, Tyler Cook series, because those are two comic book creators I really like. But as I was looking through and I picked out this book, it's really the concept that really intrigues me, and it's Meadowlark, a coming-of-age crime story. And there's so much about this. One, I'll say that I don't know much about the comic book creators here, so I'm kind of coming in blind. But as I looked at the concept, it checks off so many different boxes for me. One, I love stories that take place in one day. I don't know why. I do. In 12 Angry Men, for example, one of my favorite movies of all time, Dog Date Afternoon, I just love the idea of limiting yourself in that way to tell a story and to show so much progress, but it only being a few hours. I think when you can do it right, it can lead into incredible storytelling. So check one box. I love coming of age tales. Check another box. I mentioned previously, I love crime, the genre, not the event. I checked that box. It's also a father and son story, and I also am a huge sucker for great father and son stories, so much there. And then add to the fact that it's been compared to things like No Country for Old Men, which is a book and a movie I greatly enjoy. There's just so much here that feels like it's tailored for my interest. Will it be that great? Am I putting too much expectations into something? Does it just showcase that I just like things that I already read before? Maybe, but I'm really intrigued by this. There's just a lot here, and I love finding new comic book creators that I didn't know before and add them to my list of people that always check out their stuff. So there's just a lot here I'm really excited about. So last week I knew right away what my starting point of the week was going to be. This week was a bit of a surprise, but that tends to be a bit more fun. You may have noticed I didn't talk about any of the comics part of Free Comic Book Day. That's because I'll be doing another video where I focus just on those. With this, I just wanted to focus just on Wednesday or Tuesday, depending upon what company, your classic new comic book day, and I'll do something separate, looking at all the amazing comics that you may be able to find at your local comic book store this year's Free Comic Book Day. But as always, I know there are a ton of comic book channels out there, so I appreciate any view, any like, any comment. Thank you for any of that. Just remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, keep reading.